Welcome to the Sioux Falls City Council Informational Meeting, Tuesday, June 3rd, 2014, and call to order. First item on the agenda will be a staff report from Jim David, our Legislative Operations Manager.
Good afternoon, Jim David, Council staff. The National League of Cities will hold their Congress of Cities in Austin, Texas, November 18th through the 22nd. Please let me know if any of you are interested in attending, since hotels do fill up fast. We currently have 2 members who have expressed interest in this conference. Also, if you plan to attend an out-of-state conference next year, other than the National League of Cities, please forward the conference information to Budget Analyst Dave Bixler by Friday, June 13th. This will assist him as he prepares the Council's 2015 budget for your consideration. We are also planning to schedule the next Coffee with the Council, Saturday, July 12th, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Please let me know if this date does not work for you. If I not hear from anyone by Friday, we'll just plan to move forward with that date. And finally, as we prepare for the mid-August South Dakota Municipal League Policy Committee meetings in Pierre, an email has gone out to both Council and Administration requesting their legislative priorities for the 2015 legislative session. Please email me your proposals by Tuesday, June 10th. A draft will be discussed during an upcoming informational or working session late June or July, depending on the number of responses. I'd be happy to answer any of your questions.
Any questions from the council? Councilor Erfenbach?
Jim, thanks. You're always really good at keeping on top of the legislative stuff. I wonder, there are certain things, obviously, that we'll have bubbling up out of our conversations, but are there things that we should be thinking about in terms of legislative topics, things that we know happened last year or that went through once but didn't make it, that maybe we need to be following up on? Are there things like that that council should be thinking ahead on?
You know, if you look at, the first thing I would say is looking at last year's legislative priorities, are there certain items that should not be included? There are definitely items that did pass last year's session that will be removed, but there are a couple items that council should review and make sure that they want to include those items in the priority. So I would say that's probably number one. Number two, I think the email that went out to the different city departments is going to be very helpful to find out if there are those specific items that they face. As you recall, a couple of years ago, Public Works came with their wastewater proposal that did pass the legislature. So I think a lot of it just depends on the responses that we get from them. I have nothing specific in looking at that. So.
Okay. Well, and I think that's important too, and I hope departments understand that we want to be able to be the public face for those kinds of things and to make that part of our resolutions. So definitely, that would be good conversation. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Also an update, the fiscal committee meeting that was scheduled for 5 o'clock tonight has been canceled. Once again, the fiscal committee meeting has been canceled for tonight. Now on the agenda, we have City Council open discussion. Do we have any items for discussion? Councilor Erfenbach?
Well, I know that you all got the same email that I did, and then I've also had some additional conversations with folks who are involved with growing grass in Sioux Falls, and so I just kind of wanted to, we're not all here, but I kind of wanted to throw out that idea again of revisiting why we require grass in boulevards, and I haven't talked to staff about it, but I'd like to have that conversation again. I think we're at a point where we need to realize that we dump a lot of junk on our streets in the winter, especially those emergency snow routes, and so there's some folks that are really struggling, and I just wonder if we can't revisit how that might work. And I don't know if leadership wants to take it to a committee yet or if I should just start with a conversation, but I'd like to hear what my colleagues are thinking because it's top of the mind right now.
Councilman Rolfing?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up, Councilor Erfenbach. The Right-of-Way Committee has been meeting for about 6 or 8 months on this exact topic and has come up with some different ways of doing this. They're coming with ordinance that will, that should explain a lot and make it a lot easier for people in that situation, I think, to maybe do something a little different so that they don't have to try and continually build or grow grass, because I know what that's like, because I like mine just so, and if it's not, then it bothers me. So if you could be just a little more patient, probably in July, I believe, we're set up for that, July or August. Well, August wouldn't be, but they'll be coming with a sample ordinance and give you all kinds of illustrations of what can and can't be done that we can then jiggle around a little bit here in council and see if we like it or want to make some adjustments to it.
The right-of-way committee, have I missed something, or
It
am I
was
just totally
something
off?
that came out of, maybe, came out of, was it land use, I believe? Go ahead, Mark.
Know anything about this? I don't either.
Okay.
Thank you, Mark Cotter with Public Works. There has been a number of just customer calls on what they can and can't do. In the past, people have paved their parking lots right up to the back of curb, and that's not advantageous either. And so we took this on. There's a lot of people that have been involved, and I think, and I'll have to double check, I thought it was ready to come back to land use probably like June 20th. For them to kind of roll up, they've got a presentation of all the various things that you see out there today, and then what they've tried to do is just invoke some common sense on how much rock should be allowed in the boulevard, or non-living elements, things of that nature. So to not steal their thunder, it's coming very quickly, and I'll have Chad Heavey send you an email on that schedule.
I will tell you that it's probably going to be July
Okay.
because of some conflicts in June, but we'll probably have it in July.
Well, that's awesome. I just had no idea that was going on, and that is, I mean, the call of the week has
Right.
been over and over and over again about boulevards because of this winter.
Very good.
You know, so great, good.
Well,
thanks.
I'm really glad because I thought I had read your mind on that about 6 months ago, and we got that
you
going.
did.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. I'll just beam my thoughts to Rex, and it'll be good. Good. Thank you.
I do have one other thing, Counselor.
Is that a change of subject?
Yes.
Or can I ask a question to you then before we change the
You
subject?
certainly may.
What is the parameters of this committee looking at? Is it just grass and, ground level, or is it
Right of
complete-
way.
the
Anything
complete
that
right-of-way?
can or should be done to the right of ways in Sioux Falls.
Okay,
What
thank you.
will be acceptable, what will not be acceptable, what kind of permits you need, and that kind of thing, so that it should be pretty comprehensive.
Thank you.
Okay.
And please continue.
Yes, I just wanted to remind everybody that there's a Transit Task Force Committee tomorrow here at Carnegie Hall at 3:30 p.m. And Councilor Jameson and Anderson are on that with me, and we will be having our final meeting. I will say, I'm not going to say final, but our concluding meeting would maybe be a better way to put it. And we will be making some recommendations and bring those back to this board or this body for consideration. And this group has worked hard, really hard over the last 6-8 months. And I think we've come up with some good solutions and some things that'll take us well into the future on our with our transit system. So please plan on attending if you can. It will not be televised, but we will be able to, people will be able to be here.
Thank you. Any other items for discussion? Okay. The next thing on the agenda will be to the council members. Does anyone have a request to have a contract pulled from the consent agenda at 7 p.m. tonight?
Okay, can you, just want to know if there's going to be anything pulled?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
it, Kenny? I haven't had a chance to take I've already had contact with some of the department heads, but I'm still not sure. I might pull one or two. I'm not sure. Not very many.
Okay. Do you know which ones that you were looking at, sir?
Well, let's see here. I've got to keep looking here at the Brandon Road Lift Station, the $888,425. And I'm not sure yet about the, I don't see Don Kearney. I was going to ask him some more questions about the trash can lids. So those were the two.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, possible. I might, I'm still going to try to contact.
Sure, thank you. Councilman Rolfing?
I was under the impression that we had to have anything we pulled off of that in by Monday at noon. Is that not, that was policy of the, that was set up by, I believe, the council,
I'm very familiar with that policy.
oh, yeah, it was
It's
said right here.
Noon Tuesday.
It was said, was it Tuesday or Monday?
Noon Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Noon Tuesday,
Well, okay,
yes.
noon Tuesday then.
I always try to have it Monday.
Okay.
So, but it's noon Tuesday. And if somebody at the last minute discovers something, my understanding is they still have the right to pull it.
You probably do, but you won't have the people here to answer the questions that you need, because that's pulling them out of their personal time to come down here and spend time with us without any notice, basically. They could be pulled out at, 4 o'clock at this meeting, come back at 7 o'clock when they haven't been planning on that, and would have known by noon, or more preferably yesterday at noon, so they can make plans for it. I just don't, Councilor Segers, I don't think it's fair to ask our directors to come in here and make presentations on a last-minute basis when, when we could have it planned out a little. I believe we've had that since Friday. So an
First of
email
all,
would
let me
have-
tell you, this is not last minute. I don't know why you said
But it
last
is right
minute.
now. You just put two
No,
in there,
because
wouldn't it?
I've already had the individuals contacted long ago.
That's not what I understood. I thought you said I'm thinking about pulling a couple more. Those are your words, and I'm just
No,
wondering
no,
why.
no.
Okay.
Okay, no, you're not, you don't have it right.
And correct me, please.
Yeah, okay. Let's try this one more time. I was asked by Kenny if there were going to be any items pulled. And I said, well, there might be some pulled. I'm still, thinking about a number of these items. I wanted to actually talk to Mark Cotter, and also I wanted to talk to Don Kearney. Now, Don Kearney's already been in contact with me, and I just have a few other questions to ask about. And then with Mark here, just a few comments I wanted to ask. So that was it.
Can you do it now instead of then?
Is Don Kearney here?
No, but Mark
No,
is.
he's not.
The consent agenda is done during the city council
Yeah.
meeting, so that is when that
You're
should be
right.
done. Also, Councilor Staggers, I have 3 items that you have spoken to directors about, and you were thinking about pulling 1 or 2 of those, correct?
Yes.
Okay, that
That is-
explains it a lot
that is
better
what-
than the way I heard it. I apologize for that.
Okay, that's all right.
Thank you.
Uh-huh, you bet.
All right. Next on the agenda, we will move into presentations. We will start with Heartland Consumer Power District Integrated Resource Plan for Electrical Power. We'll have Mr. Trent Lubers starting the presentation.
Good afternoon, City Council. Trent Lubers with the Office of Public Works. You should each have a copy of the presentation and also the Integrated Resource Plan in front of you. The Light and Power Division for the City of Sioux Falls has 2,500 customers, primarily residential, but we also have 500 commercial and governmental customers. As a power utility, we're unique in that we don't generate any power. We buy and resell power. Our 2 sources of power are from the Western Area Power Administration, otherwise known as WAPA, and that's the hydroelectric, that's the dams. And then we also, because they can't provide all the power that we need, we have a supplemental power provider, which is Heartland Consumer Power District. One of the requirements of us from WAPA is that every 5 years we need to submit an integrated resources plan, which essentially is a planning document as far as how we're going to use power, how we're going to grow, those types of things, and it's a planning tool for them also. As a customer of Heartland Consumer Power District, they prepare that plan for us. Adam Graff is the resource manager for Heartland Consumer Power District, and he's here to take you through the IRP presentation and will be available for questions afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. As Trent mentioned, my name is Adam Graff. I'm the resource manager at Heartland Consumer Power District. Trent did a very good job at kind of summarizing the cities, or more specifically the municipal electric's relationship with Heartland. So just this one here. Okay. Sorry. As Trent mentioned, every 5 years, as part of the Energy Policy Act of 1997, the Federal Energy Policy Act, they require WAPA or WAPA requires its customers, more specifically, to submit an integrated resource plan to WAPA. And as Trent mentioned, the integrated resource plan is a document that kind of summarizes and puts together, in essence, an action plan for the utility and how they plan to serve their customers, over the 5-year planning horizon and beyond, and then an action plan as far as operations related to that. As an option for its customers, WAPA developed a program that allows customers to form what they call cooperatives or integrated resource planning cooperatives. So these plans can be submitted as a group amongst WAPA's customers, or as a group of WAPA's customers. That fits in really well for Heartland's customers. Heartland has 30 municipal, cooperative, and state agency customers. 22 of those customers have federal hydropower allocations from WAPA, the Sioux Falls Municipal Light and Power being one of them. So as a service to our customers, starting in 1997 with the initial IRP requirements, Heartland created a cooperative to submit these reports. There's a 5-year annual plan, which you have in front of you, which we're going to talk about today, that needs to be submitted every 5 years. And then there are annual reports that are submitted that just kind of summarize the steps taken that speak towards the action plan detailed in the 5-year plan. Heartland submits those on their customers' behalf as a service. And Heartland has done this since 1997 and will continue to do this for its customers. So that's kind of why I'm here today, to kind of go over the integrated resource plan the Heartland has developed on behalf and with the cooperation of its customers. We have a unique situation in Heartland where we have a number of customers that are much smaller in size as a utility than the City of Sioux Falls. The City of Sioux Falls peak load, I believe, in 2013 was in the neighborhood of 13 to 14 megawatts. Heartland has a vast majority of our customers have a load of 2 megawatts or less, and WAPA has an alternative for smaller customers to the integrated resource plan called the small customer plan. So Heartland actually has 2 cooperatives that we submit plans for, one being the IRP cooperative that entails our larger customers. The cutoff for those plans is total energy sales, and if total energy sales on an annual basis exceed 25 gigawatt hours, or 25 million kilowatt hours essentially, then you're part of an IRP cooperative. If you're less than that, you qualify for the small customer plan. So the IRP cooperative that Sioux Falls is a part of includes 4 Heartland customers, as you can see here, the City of Madison, the City of Miller, and the City of Volga, which all have municipal utilities in their communities. The main components of the plan that you have in front of you are kind of 4 parts. There's historical load information, and along with that historical information, a forecast that covers the planning horizon of the 5-year planning horizon. There are supply side and demand side resource summaries, which is basically a summary of how the cooperative or how the customers plan to meet their load requirements over that period. Supply side meaning resources, power plants. Heartland's case, we'll go through this a little more, coal, wind, some gas. And then demand side being more demand side programs like direct load management, energy efficiency programs, which Heartland administers some on their customers' behalf, and our customers also do that themselves. And then there's an action plan as part of the 5-year integrated resource plan. The action plan just kind of details how you plan to meet your goals or the objectives you stated in your IRP. So the action plan that you see in front of you details the programs that Heartland offers through its customers on the veins of energy efficiency, load management, also economic development programs, and then, of course, more operations-based stuff with the resources and market operations. Sioux Falls specifically, this is a trend. There's more information in the plan itself. This is a trend that shows a 10-year history of the city's or the municipal light system demand and energy from 2004 through 2013, and then a 6-year forecast. So that takes us through the planning horizon. As you can see, the load of the city has been relatively consistent. We've seen some long-term growth, which we see amongst most of our customers. The last 10 years have been somewhat unique, more specifically that period between 2008 and 2012. With the recession, we did see some decreases, and the city weathered it fairly well on the utility side. We did see some dips. Just to note, in the future, you do see a kind of a steep increase there in the 2014 to 2015 timeframe. What that accounts for is the new event center that the city is constructing. We tried to incorporate projections from the event center's architects and engineers into our forecast and account for that in our load growth. So that's what you see there in that bump in the city's load. Now, the plan itself, as far as the supply side and demand side summaries that I mentioned earlier, we look at those on a Heartland-wide basis. As a cooperative, we're reporting on how Heartland, through its customers, or how its customers through Heartland more specifically, is going to meet its load obligations. This is a quick summary of the resource planning period. You see the load forecast trends. There's a couple different forecast trends there. The light blue trend is Heartland's internal forecast that we use for budgeting and planning on a short-term basis, and then we also periodically have an outside firm conduct a long-term planning resource plan for, or a load forecast for us. That was most recently done in the fall of 2013, so it's very recent. That's labeled as the B&M demand forecast. That's Burns and McDonald's consulting firm we used. You can see the forecast. There's a little bit of variance. I think Burns and Mac was probably a little more optimistic on their short-term load growth than we are internally, just in what we've seen. But in summary, they match pretty close. Then the stacks you see, the bar graphs just show the resources our customers will use to serve that load. The bottom of the stack, that orange block, is the aggregate federal hydropower allocations from WAPA that our customers hold. As Trent mentioned, the city holds their own WAPA allocation, which serves, I think, roughly about 50% of your load. You have a pretty large portion. You see about 80 megawatts here on the front end of the planning horizon. That's an aggregate of Heartland's total customer WAPA allocations. That changes in the 2017 timeframe with some expirations of contracts for Heartland customers. And then above that WAPA allocation, you see Heartland's resource mix. So LRS is Laramie River Station, and WEC 2 is Wayland Energy Center Unit 2. Those are two resources owned by Heartland. Both coal-fired generators. LRS is located in Wheatland, Wyoming. Heartland has a 50 megawatt ownership share in that. And the Wayland Energy Center is also a coal-fired unit that's located in Hastings, Nebraska. Heartland has an 80 megawatt ownership entitlement in that. You'll see over the planning horizon, those quantities change a little bit, and that's just reflective of some contracts Heartland has with other utilities to sell portions of those resources on a short-term basis to try to balance out our loads and resources. The WSW is the Wessington Springs Wind Energy Center. That's a wind farm located near Wessington Springs. Heartland has a purchase power agreement with NextAir Energy for the entire output of that facility. That's rated at 51 megawatts. And then beyond that, we have some customer generation. A number of our customer communities own their own gas generators that we contract for capacity from. And then we also rely, especially in the front end of the planning horizon, on some contract purchases, some more short-term purchases to try to balance out our resource mix. Just of note in this trend, you kind of see towards the out years, 2017 and beyond, a surplus in resources. Heartland right now is long-term anyways, is long on resource due to just some cycling in contracts and a expiration of a contract with a large customer. We are working on filling that gap, but for the plan, we only reflected those contracts and agreements that Heartland currently has in place. This is same information. This is just on an energy basis as opposed to capacity. Information is generally the same. You see the resource stack. The numbers shake out a little different in that some of those resources, and most specifically the gas-fired customer generation, is a capacity-only resource. We normally don't run those units for energy purposes, mostly due to cost. They're a very high-cost resource, but they are available for peak times if we need them. But you can see that on an energy basis, we rely heavily on Laramie River Station and Wayland Energy Center Unit 2, our coal resources, and then that gets filled in above that with the wind, of course, and contract purchases, and then, of course, your federal hydropower allocations. This is a quick summary of the action plan. There's a lot more detail in the action plan included in the 5-year plan you have in front of you. This just details the programs in 3 areas that Heartland and its customers offer or have available to them in the areas of economic development, energy efficiency, and then operations. A couple things to note on here. The large load incentive or the Energy One program you see under economic development, that's something that may be familiar to you. It's probably been in front of you recently. That's a program that the City of Sioux Falls has taken advantage of with the new event center that offers a reduced energy-only rate for a short term for large loads. Beyond that, it's just kind of a detail of our programs. There's some detailed information on each one of them in there, and those are available to our customers, the City of Sioux Falls included. As far as the mechanics of the report was developed by Heartland and reviewed by each of our customers. Each customer of the cooperative, the City of Sioux Falls included, will need to approve this before it's submitted to WAPA. Obviously, that's why I'm here presenting this to you today. The report is due to be submitted to WAPA on June 16th. At that point, WAPA will go through an internal review and then take action and hopefully approve the plan without any necessary changes. I can speak, this is the 3rd IRP plan I've been a part of, and we've never had to make any changes to a submitted plan. So I think we feel pretty comfortable that once we make this submission on June 16th, that we should be good as far as the IRP requirements go for another 5 years. It's kind of a quick synopsis of the plan and the process. I'd be happy to take any of your questions or comments.
Questions from the committee? Councilor Staggers?
Yes. I noticed on your one chart dealing with Sioux Falls load forecast.
Yes.
You mentioned, of course, that we're going to have a sharp increase in the amount of energy because of the event center. Do you have any idea about how much that's going to cost the city with that increase for the event center?
Well, the load projections that we got from the architects and engineers basically amount to about 4 megawatts of peak load on top of the 13 or so megawatts you have currently. The load factor, so that's just a ratio of the energy to the peak, is about 50%. So it's a substantial amount of demand in energy. Speaking on an average rate standpoint, Heartland's average rate to its customers today is just right about 7 cents a kilowatt hour. So, you can kind of take that 4 megawatts and, over the course of a year at 50% load factor, you're looking at about 240,000 megawatt hours at 7 cents a kilowatt hour, $70 a megawatt hour. To do the math on that, I'm sorry, I'm doing this in my head.
You're doing pretty good.
Thank you. It amounts to, let's say, 250 times. Wish I had a calculator in front of me. I'm an engineer. I don't do well with stuff in my head. Yeah. I think there's a decimal point there. So is 180,000 or 1 point? 240,000 megawatt hours times $70 a megawatt hour. Yeah, it's 7 cents a kilowatt hour, and there's 1,000 kilowatt hours in a megawatt hour. So I think we're talking 1.8 million. With the Energy One rate I mentioned before, that has I believe the event center is a 5-year term. The Energy One rate is a fixed rate over that 5-year term. That's about 5.5 cents. So the actual cost to the city over the first 5 years of that would be substantially less. 2.5 cents times, the total. So, it's a substantial cost, I think, I'm sorry, go ahead, Trent.
No, I think we'll come back with some numbers for you so we can show you that exactly as far as what it is. And Adam's numbers are probably fairly close, but I just want to make sure that we give you an accurate number. If that's okay, we can bring that back to you.
But you mentioned, I just want to clarify, the 1.8 million you happen to mention is that fairly close, do you think, or?
Without looking at the numbers, I don't want to speculate exactly what it is. One of the things that we purchase power and we resell it, so the event center will have a rate, and so that's essentially a pass-through for the utility other than some cost of overhead that we'll accept. And then also because of the offset for peaking, we won't share those peaking costs with the event center for the first 5 years because of the Energy One program.
Yeah. But anyway, it's going to be a lot of money, which is to be expected. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yeah, and just to add on what Trent said, we'd be more than happy to put together some projections for the council on costs on the incentive rate plus, and long-term costs, once you're on the full rate too.
Thanks a lot.
Go ahead, Trent.
Councilor Staggers, I can actually provide you a number that was in a rate model. We'll be sharing rate models with you, but 676, was it, Mark? About 600,000 is the revenue that will generate from the event center. That's what was projected in our rate model.
Okay. That's
Annual cost, right?
Yeah, but we'll be paying for the electricity. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Councilor Rolfing?
Thank you. I notice on one of your slides here, the forecast and resource for the IRP, you indicated that two of the plants you buy from are going to be coal generated.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure you're aware of what's happened in the last couple of days with the
Acutely
EPA coming
aware
out,
of it, yes.
saying we're not going to do those anymore or whatever. They're going to cut them back, and it's supposedly going to raise the rates of electric power up dramatically. I know that's not fair, Greg, to give it to you, or Adam rather, to give it to you, and say what effect is that going to have, because you haven't even had a chance to look at it, or maybe you have. Do you see it coming down the line?
Not at the details. As from a utility industry perspective, this is something that's not unexpected. We've seen this coming. The administration, the EPA, has made allusions to this for quite some time. As far as numbers, I cannot give you any numbers at this point. The proposed draft rule was just released yesterday. I can say it's 520 some pages long. We have not reviewed the entire thing yet, as you can imagine. What I can tell you is Heartland's long-term resource mix has us, now this is the Heartland portion, so this doesn't include your WAP allocation, but Heartland's resource mix long-term is about 60% coal. So any carbon legislation or any rules that tie any sort of cost, whether it be a tax or a cap and trade, is going to have an upward rate pressure on Heartland. I can say that regionally we're right in line from a South Dakota state perspective, right in line as far as average resource mix being about 60% coal. That's pretty common to state. Nationwide, it's probably significantly higher than other parts of the country, but regionally that's pretty common. At this point, all I can tell you is any sort of legislation that comes down that is carbon-based is going to put upward pressure on our rates and regionally everyone's rates relying on coal. So I'm sure there'll be a lot more to come in that sense. The advantage the city has is your WAP allocation, your hydropower allocation accounts for roughly 50% of your load, and that's carbon neutral generation. So it's a big benefit to the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I'd like to ask one. If in your IRP action plan, one of the programs that you have is, well, we already talked about the economic development grants, correct? Could you speak to your energy efficient grants, and does Sioux Falls participate in any of those programs?
Yeah, our energy efficiency grant program, we budget an allotment of funds every year to provide grants to our customers, which are essentially the city's utilities, to make energy efficiency improvements in city facilities or facilities that the city is responsible for the utility bills on. I am fairly certain that the city has taken advantage of a grant in the past. I can't think of a specific case right off the top of my head. I could come back with that, but pretty common grants we give out to cities such as Sioux Falls are grants for street lighting improvements, for instance, more efficient street lighting or mechanical upgrades in city facilities. So, and we, I think on average, give out about $50,000 in grants a year to our customers, and I think pretty much every year those funds get used. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Next on agenda then will be rate reviews for Public Works departments. And we'll have Mark Cotter, the Public Works Director, beginning the presentation.
Good afternoon, Council. Dean Borkhardt has books for you. This is the annual marathon rate reviews that we bring to you. We do have a lot of detail, but we are prepared to go through this quickly for you and get to your questions. The look forward is next week is first reading, and the week after is second in action. You know, for many of the council members, this is something that they've seen on an annual basis. Councilman Anderson, Erickson, and Kylie will be new, and so if there's any opportunity that you'd like us to sit down with you ahead of time on those actions, we'd be more than happy to do it. Our team is here tonight, and so as we go through this, once we get to the end, if you have questions, I'm confident we'll be able to answer your questions, and if not, we'll come back to you on Monday.
He's at the end. Yeah.
All right, we're not working here. All right, so what we're going to take you through today is 5 utilities. Light and power, which we just heard from, and we'll speak more to that, landfill tipping fees, and then essentially 3 items on water, storm drainage, water purification, and water reclamation. One of the things that has been very, well presented in the past in our discussions is that for about 22 to 25 years there was little to no rate increases. And now for the last 8 years, we've been on a catch-up process, and we didn't do that all in 1 year. We took a stair-stepped approach to fund a lot of infrastructure. Probably key infrastructure was our supply with Lewis and Clark. But we're here to take you through all of them tonight and ultimately answer your questions. Let's get started. One of the things that you'll see is that when we have a water main break, these are aging pipes that we want to make sure that we have a good, aggressive capital plan so we can reduce risk and reduce uninterrupted and maintain service. This is a picture from inside of our new filter building at the water purification plant. And it just is here to emulate that we make large investments. These systems that these team members run are very complex. They are designed to run 24 hours a day and ultimately have redundancy and backup to make sure if primary one goes down, there's a secondary that's there to back it up if possible. One of the things that we were asked to do last time is to bring a 2-year rate model forward. So we haven't been here actually for 2 years. And so we'll continue with that with light and power, sanitary landfill, water purification, water reclamation. The reason we'd like to stay on 2 years is that the ability for that capital plan to change can change significantly, and we'd like to just be able to always rebaseline that every 2 years. We are proposing a 3-year rate model on storm drainage, and we'll take you through that as well. All right, Sioux Falls Light and Power, we'll take you through our 2015 and 2016 rate recommendations. Trent Lubers is our Utility Operations Administrator. We're in the process of refilling Mike Burkhart's position, which you've gotten to know Mike Burkhart well. He actually had a 38-year career with the city. Very good, left this utility in very good shape, and within the next 2 weeks we should expect to select his replacement. All right, so just some light and power facts. This is a fairly small service territory, but some of the key customers that we serve are listed there. Water purification plant is the #1 customer, and so as the gentleman from Heartland just talked about half of the power that this utility gets is from WAPA, which is Western Area Power Administration. That's the power that's generated off the dams. And the fact that the water purification plant is the largest customer, that means every customer in the city of Sioux Falls benefits from that low-cost, stable, carbon-free power. And then we've listed the other ones there as well. Some modeling facts is that the cost of purchase power is anticipated to stabilize before the articles were wrote. But we do believe that, you know, going through that type of legislation, there's likely going to be some legal challenges that we just negotiated a long-term contract with Heartland, and one of the aspects of that was to avoid demand charges on the events for the first 5 years. And so they were interested in a long-term contract. We were interested in getting a good deal for our customers, and that's why the cost of power for the event center for the first 5 years is going to be relatively low. Okay, 74% of this budget is actually the cost to buy power before we resell it. In every utility, we've established reserve levels so we can adequately run the utilities, but also be able to respond if bad things happen quickly, and that we need to use cash reserves to address them quickly. We're going to upgrade a number of distribution lines. Essentially, a power company has a number of circuits. We have 12 here, 11 of them are active, and we're constantly looking at them to either split them or upgrade them to improve reliability and reduce the risk of failure. This is a good news story. This utility has no current or future debt anticipated. Okay, just a couple of key projects that we want to reference. I'll bring you to the center one that our customers will, we're going to be working through a new meter socket, which allows us over the wire to turn on and turn off and also read their meters electronically. And so that'll be a nice upgrade from a service standpoint and a good efficiency to achieve. Okay. Okay, for summary, last year or 2 years ago when we were here to present the model results for you in 2012, the model projected that we would not be anticipating rate increases in 15 and 16. Operational and capital costs have tracked as projected, and so we are still projecting no rate increase for 2015 and 2016. All right, now let's go to regional landfill. Again, we're going to try to get through this quickly, and then we'll get your questions at the end. Dave McElroy is here. Dave is the landfill superintendent, and the landfill is multifaceted from a standpoint that we have to manage all the waste that comes into this 5-county area. Next slide. We also have a gas system where we deliver gas to Poet 24/7. We generate about $200,000 worth of methane gas revenues every month. And then also this utility is responsible for the funding of the sustainability team and the household hazardous waste facility. Municipal solid waste is essentially just your everyday trash. As we talk about acronyms of MSW and C&D, which we call construction demolition debris, this is essentially what's in the dumpsters that are in front of construction sites, renovations, concrete, wood, metal, and glass. So as we go through there, we'll often talk about MSW, and just remember that is your household or commercial garbage, and C&D is construction waste. The key modeling assumptions that really drive the revenue adequacy needs are we're expecting a 1% increase in waste tonnage annually for the next 2 years. You'll see in our outlook graphs that we do look out about 10 years in each one of these utilities to anticipate what those capital needs are. We're going to complete the evaluation of a C&D material recovery facility this year and potentially part of next year with the intent of constructing that facility and bringing it online in 2016. Essentially a C&D facility, if you look at any given dumpster in town with the wood, metals from sheet metal, sheetrock, what have you, about 70% of what's in a construction dumpster can be source separated and then resold as a commodity. And so we can gain that revenue, but then the true gain is you're not burying it anymore and you preserve that landfill airspace for future generations. And so we'll be bringing forward those performance to you when they're ready. So then the large drivers that are in this capital plan is C&D material recovery facility, always extracting leachate, which is essentially the black liquid that's inside a landfill. Even when it rains and it percolates through all that waste, it turns to, it's a black liquid. It's considered leachate in the industry. And then just with filling the existing landfill, the fact that we have a great customer, a Poet, at the ethanol plant. We're continuing to expand the gas system. Landfill acquisition, it's key for us to continue to try to buy additional land for buffer and future when it becomes available. And so in many years, that's a placeholder in our plan. But there have been some opportune acquisitions that we've been able to pick up adjacent to landfill. And then last, our composting operation's been very successful, and this will drive an increased floor or pad size. All right, and so in summary, for the 2-year rate review, we're recommending a rate increase in 2015 and not in 2016. And so a $1 per ton tipping fee would be on MSW. $1 per ton tipping fee would be added to the C&D. And then for MSW and C&D outside the county, in the past we've had this at about $96.50 without really any justification on how that was arrived. And so in working with Diane Best, our new public works attorney, really to get that more to a justified range, and this is very, very, very little amount of tonnage that comes in from outside the 5-county area, but it's just to right-size that to more of a justified price, and so those would be recommended to decrease by $32.50 per ton. Okay, and then some smaller fees that we would recommend to adjust. I'll just list out the top 2. If you drive a pickup to the landfill, you'll pay a tipping fee of $16 a ton. We're recommending to increase that to $18. And in many times, just to give you the methodology, we've had this be about a half of the tonnage tipping fee, which we're recommending to get to 36, and so 18 would be half of that. There's some other minor rate increases. I will mention that the mattress and box spring, today we actually take those in, and there's about a $7 per cost to take it to a recyclable. Every element of a mattress or a box spring is recoverable and recyclable, and so we more just wheel those through the landfill and then take them to that vendor. Our cost has been $7 a piece, and we're recommending that rate be set at $9. Next slide. Okay, this is a common slide that you'll see on how our rates benchmark in the region. And so today, the top line, the red line, we're in the lower quartile of this collection of cities. And then provided those cities make no rate adjustments, which normally, just like the City of Sioux Falls, we go through either an annual or an every 2-year process, that likely their fees will also go up. But if they don't, this is where we would land in those coming years with the $1 per ton increase in 15, and then that is static for 16. This is a similar graph for C&D waste, and again, we start in basically the lower third, and we move down to about the 50% area, but still very good, responsible rates to keep this permitted, very heavily regulated landfill where it needs to be. Okay, and then this is a policy item that we wanted to bring forward since we can take care of rates and policy. This has been an issue that's been brought before council in the past, and it's the factor of having all these different garbage cans in the front of people's houses. In some of these areas where very dense housing's been built, that's all you see. And so the Solid Waste Planning Board took this item up, and just to share with you those 3 pictures, backslide, the large container dumpster that's in the upper left, and then the 2 lower pictures that have the large visible trash cans in the front is something that we'd like to avoid. And so now the policy clarifications would be, today it's very broad the way it's wrote in ordinance, and it's probably very hard to enforce because the word they say is, your garbage can should be in an inconspicuous location. And so we thought we'd apply some common sense and try to really clarify that. And so the Solid Waste Planning Board and its respective committee took this up, and the language that they came back with is garbage and recycling containers should be stored inside, beside, or behind the structure within 3 feet except for the day of collection. So that should address where there legally can be. No containers larger than 125 gallons for single-family properties will be permitted. And then C&D roll-off containers, essentially the construction dumpsters, are limited to 30 days or a valid building permit. And we did want to reference, just like we do normally if we bring something to the Infrastructure Review and Advisory Board, Solid Waste Planning Board did take this up and approve these policy changes. All right, storm drainage utility. This is probably really the largest utility that we have to talk about tonight because we have not done a rate increase in this utility in many years, and we'll talk about that. Andy Berg is our principal drainage engineer that really dove into this topic, and then Sean Gaddy with A2S, the Nexus individual, is here. And I do want to take just a minute that A2S has been a consultant that's been with us from the very beginning. Sean, you raise your hand. And many of you got to know Steve Burrian very well. They're also our direct consultant and advisor on Lewis and Clark. They've been a great partner. For the first probably 6 years, they did all this rate analysis with their Nexus team. And then last year we asked to be trained, and Brad Vosted and Dean Borkart really were trained and now are doing our own rate models in-house. We did do a small contract with them this year since it was the first time we did it for QCQA, but that transfer of knowledge has gone really well. We did keep the AE2S on full-time to do this one because it's really the first analysis that we would bring to you. Okay. All right, just to give you a step backwards, on May 7th and May 21st, we took this presentation to the Infrastructure Review and Advisory Board. It was much longer than what you're going to see. The full version is available on those IRAB minutes. And any additional information you'd want to see, we can bring back. I want you to know it's a very detailed, very technical presentation that we spent some good quality time with the developers, the private utilities, city staff, local engineers to really talk through the issues, get input, make adjustments, and then ultimately did get the approval of IRAB unanimously to move forward with these recommended rates. Let's get started. So storm drainage was started in 1982, safely convey urban runoff to the Big Sioux River. It's a good day with the rain outside to talk about good drainage. In 2003, the city took a larger look at how to really manage storm drainage in our growing areas. You know, one small detention pond that is very visible in town is the one in front of Bracco's. That's one that we call a site-specific. So as that development was laid out, all that stormwater was directed to go into that pond and then be slowly released. And so you can either do things site-specific, and a number of our developments have to be that just based on where they're located. But then we hired a firm, a national firm that looked at our growth area out to beyond 2025 at the time. And we took the approach of let's build one large pond to serve anywhere from 70 to 500 acres. And so we have one large piece of green space to manage instead of potentially 25 to 50 small site-specific ponds like you'll see in front of Bracco's. And so that process has gone well. We've added platting fees to fund some of those large land purchases and structures. And so some of that is what drives these rates today. Let's go to the next slide. So essentially, in the funding that comes into these utilities in two parts. On your tax bill, you have a component of it that's called the drainage fee. And it's probably one of the best deals you have with Public Works. And then there's a platting fee portion that comes in that as land developers develop, they plat their land and then they pay one platting fee for sure, and if they're in one of these regionally served areas, they also pay a second platting fee. So those three boxes today fund operation and maintenance, capital improvements in existing areas, but also capital improvements in developing areas. And so listed under those three areas, operation and maintenance, and across the top is all a little bit more detail of what's in those respective buckets of work that we have to address in the revenue adequacy piece. Next slide. Here's a few pictures to just give you a sense of where the dollars go and where the additional dollars will go. We're starting to see our inlets really start to deteriorate faster than we've currently programmed to fix them, and so the additional revenue will be key so we can essentially do more. Next slide's another intake that you'll see. And we do private contracts with these each year to address a number of them, but we would like to accelerate that program. Drainage channels need to be cleaned out to make sure that our streets that have catchment can adequately drain so we can reduce the street flooding. Street sweeping is key. That first street sweep every year, we have this utility fund because we want to make sure we keep all that material as much as possible out of the storm drainage system. These next two slides are from the same drainage channel. And so we've made a number of really good drainage channel rehabilitations in the last few years. This one's a very notable one on Tomar Channel. This was a before picture. Next slide. And this is after. And so not only did we get a chance to go in there, clear out the trees, really re-baseline where the water flows, we also reset where the sanitary sewer is in here, and it's been a significant upgrade. We've got more of these to do, and we've identified those. Okay. With any of these areas, a lot of this open space, you'll have some settlement, you'll have garbage, you'll have mowing that you need to address on a frequent basis, and that takes resources. Wetland management, since we're the responsible party on creating and or mitigating some of these wetlands, we've got to make sure that we're funding those plans adequately. Mosquito control, some ask why does this utility participate in some of the funding for mosquito control, and essentially a lot of our ponds are the breeding ground of mosquitoes, and so we've partnered with health to pay a portion of mosquito control to make sure that those ponds get treated, so not only the people that live next to them have good mosquito control, but also we really reduce that breeding opportunity. And then here's an outlet structure for a typical large regional detention pond that I'd said that probably serves anywhere from 70 to 500 acres. That these pieces of infrastructure are costly, and just with the progressive growth of the city of Sioux Falls, we got to make sure that we have the cash to move forward and build with development. This is a familiar site that there are areas of town where we have a lot of frequent sump pump pumpers, and we've got a number of retrofit projects. We have 3 more neighborhoods that we're retrofitting this year. The next picture shows you, here's a retrofit going in. We'll do a lot of this with directional drill, but essentially once we identify that we have an older neighborhood that has 1, 2, 3, 4 frequent pumpers, then we'll work with them. We'll put the sump pump collection system in so we can reduce the amount of water that's going over streets in the summer and winter time, reduce the algae, reduce that slippery aspect that those frequent pumpers create. Now with the new levee systems, there's going to be additional operation and maintenance requirements placed on this team, and we want to make sure that we can not only meet but exceed the expectations of the Corps as we get our frequent inspections. Another shot. So the expanded revenue requirements, our request to you is the 3 purple boxes that we talked initially. In addition is to add the flood control system, renewal and replacement, and then the additional operation and maintenance revenue requirements. Okay, now the storm drainage study, the city did contract with the A2S back in 2008. That was really in August of 2008 is when we really started to see some of the first effects of the recession. And so as we came forward with the recommendation, we internally said let's delay this because we're recommending rate increases on 2 groups. One is citywide on the drainage fee that you pay on your taxes, and then the other is on developers. And so there's a revenue adequacy need to raise rates on both sides. Okay. And so we got a number of driving forces, but the key is to meet the critical revenue requirements to proactively run this utility. Next slide. The drivers in this rate study is the cost to growth, rate design, and revenue adequacy analysis. There's 2 platting fees that developers pay today if they're in a regional system. The first is what we call the DSCR. That's the Drainage System Cost Recovery. This essentially funds when we build a pond, oversizing a pipe to convey the water to it and the outlet structures. Then the regional detention charge is the second platting fee, that if your land falls in one of those areas that we're going to build that will be served by a regional detention facility, you have to pay that secondary platting fee. So this gives you a sense of where those platting fees are today. So where it says DSCR SCFFE, we're at $15.80 and it needs to get to $19.79. And then the RDC fee, the last line, is at $7.63 today, and we need to get it to $810. One of our discussions, again, just like with water rates many years back, is that we don't like to make a lot of those large rate adjustments in one year. And so we've worked with we've worked internally to bring this forward in a 3-staged approach. And again, this was supported by IRAB. But I just want to direct your eyes to the highlighted line. And so today's platting fee on single family for DSCR, Drainage System Cost Recovery, is $15.79, and about an 8% increase across would generate those 3 elevated fees for $15, $16, and $17. Okay. Same approach is taken with the RDC. And so today's platting fee is $762.57 per acre, and this has a smaller increase to achieve. It's about 2% per year, and it would equate to those 3 revised platting fees for those respective years. Now, the drainage fee recommendation for the entire city as you pay your tax bills today, and we'll kind of start at the bottom. The typical bill for a 7,500 square foot lot is about $33.86 annually. And so we're recommending for 2015 about a $3 increase on that fee. In 2016 about $3 more, and then ultimately in 2017 about $4 more, to take us from $33.86 up to $43.82 over a 3-year period. Again, the evaluation of the overall health of this fund has those respective 6 drivers in them, and it's not just the annual O&M or the pace of development. The other key add here is now that we've raised our levy systems and brought them up to the standard that they're at, there's new rules in place to maintain them and report their function at a more frequent rate. And so those additional revenue requirements will put this utility on the right track. All right, here's a graph that can be confusing, but I will just take you through it in somewhat slow fashion. That as you look at this line, this is one of our target reserve level lines that we like to set to make sure that we have those key reserve targets to make sure that we can operate this utility not only from a day-to-day basis, but also that we have dollars in the bank to respond if we need to in a short time. The next piece is to establish these purple bars. This is for when the pace of development happens and we need to build ponds. We typically will see about 1.5 ponds built on an annual basis, these large regional detention ponds. But we do have years where we've had multiple requests, so we've got what we call an upset situation that we could potentially construct 3. And then the RDC, the actual this green area to purchase the land, that's been a fairly consistent process. So To ultimately get there, we have an iterative process here on setting rates. And so for the next 3 years, we would recommend a 9% rate increase. That's what we just talked about, that $3 to $4 annually on our customers throughout the city to make sure that we can achieve those respective targets. Okay? Next slide. Here's the benchmark slide of where our current fees rate today. We're on the, I would say, the lower third with our rates today. And again, provided there's no, that these other cities don't make other rate adjustments over the next 3 years, that this is where our revised 3 targets would land for those respective years. Okay? All right, water purification and water reclamation are next. These are much shorter. Thank you for staying with us on storm drainage. Again, this is a great news story. This is another utility that we started about 8 years ago, and we've seen many double-digit rate increases, and we've got a very aggressive capital plan to meet our customers' needs, and also just setting very good from a revenue adequacy standpoint. Next slide. I don't want to miss, Greg Anderson is here. He runs this utility, if you'd raise your hand. And he and his team are constantly at work 24/7 to make sure that you have uninterrupted service. This is a nice slide to just give you a sense of how low cost our water is. You know, as you talk about that every day you should have about 8 glasses of water. If you did that every day of the year, the cost of that water from the City of Sioux Falls would only be $1.57 for the entire year. And so it's very good water. It's been recognized. This team and its output has been recognized by the EPA for the quality of its water and also for the cost of its water. Okay, the couple of facts for you, that the current distribution system makes up about 833 miles of pipeline, and we sell about 19 million gallons of water per day. Give you a sense of really where the investments are made. Repair and replacement of infrastructure. We've noted one of the key ones, but we've got a number of projects. We're going to make a $24.43 million investment over the next 5 years. New developments, some of those large transmission mains that would follow like South Dakota 100, and when a new development gets platted and we have to extend a main down a mile road, that'll account for nearly $29 million. And then in our investment in source and supply, we've got opportunities locally in our own well field to continue to enhance those collector wells and to put collector wells in. And so we've got collector wells in our plan to do that. Okay. I will say again, this is a good news story. We've long since relied on state revolving fund dollars, which is about 2.5% to 3% money, to finance a number of the projects that were in the water purification division. And today we don't have any additional debt forecasted in this utility. Over the next 10 years, we expect to pay down our existing debt about $48 million. And all those projects that we just highlighted, from reinvestment into our existing system, new source and supply, and development, will all be cash funded. Okay. Would you go back a slide, Trent? So in 2012, just 2 years ago when we brought you rate models forward, we were still projecting that we would need a rate increase in 15 and 16 to adequately have the revenue requirements to run this utility. And that has changed. We've sold a lot of water and also controlled our expenses. And so the 2014 rate model projection is a 0% rate increase on water for 15 and 16. Okay, I'll take you through. This is probably one of the most complicated graphs, but I do want you to look at them as not a complicated process. If you look at the green bars, when we started this process, we said we really wanted to always have responsible reserves in place to make sure that we could adequately run the utility, because in many cases you have to write large purchase orders to bring in rail cars of lime and and a number of other large costs. And so you have to be able to make those purchases, and you've got to have cash in the bank to do those. And then, so that's the green bar, and so we've established what that target should be, and our rate model has us meeting that very smoothly at that black line. The next bar is this blue bar, and that's an additional bucket of reserves that we've set aside, that if we have to buy more Lewis and Clark water than we expect, we want to make sure that we have the cash reserves in place to do that. But also, if they would have a rate change, we want to make sure that our customers won't be negatively affected. And so we've been able to build that reserve amount, and it's built, and it's just being maintained. And then you'll see where our current cash is at, with getting out of debt funding a lot of this capital and going more into the cash-funded capital. We're going to start to use a lot of that cash that we have on hand, but also really come in for a smooth landing. And then we start to raise capital again, so as we have to make a true-up payment to Lewis and Clark when we call for our final allocation of water and have to participate in those well costs, if we do, we want to make sure that we have dollars available on hand to make that cost. So all those respective buckets of reserves are driven by this iterative process on what rates need to be, and that's what this line is. And so last year we just came off of, in 13 and 14, a 3% rate increase on our customers. This year, this goes down to 0. And then right now, as we forecast, we're looking at about a 3% rate increase in 17 and 18. But again, there's a lot of variables, and so that's why we would today only recommend doing a 2-year rate model in this utility. Okay. Next slide. Okay, here's the benchmark slide. Again, we're right in the center. There's a number of different communities that you've asked us to add over time, and so we continue to build this. And so that's it's one of those things you don't really want to be on the lowest end because you're probably not investing into your own system enough, and you don't want to be on the highest end because you're probably really in a catch-up mode or you're under some federal mandate to upgrade your system. And so we still feel very good about where the utilities costs are at for the City of Sioux Falls. And here's those 3 respective rates. Okay, last utility that we'll share, Mark Perry. He runs the water reclamation facility. Mark, if you'd raise your hand. All right, let's get started. This just gives you a picture from the air of the wastewater plant that the citizens of Sioux Falls own. It has a design capacity of 21 million gallons per day. We have an average flow last year of about 16 million gallons per day and have just over 50,000 customers to collect, convey, and treat their wastewater. Just a couple other fun facts about this system. There's 23 lift stations. 4 of them are major, 2 are private. Very similar to what the water system is. This has just over 800 miles of collection mains. They size from 6 to 66-inch diameter. There's over 15,000 manholes and structures that this team needs to maintain. One of the most significant events happened in 2010 where we had a collapse up by Walnut and Maple that drove us to go out and do a full assessment of our large collection mains. It wasn't very many years before that period of time where that main was actually observed and core was taken and didn't have the degradation that we seen just a few years later, and then ultimately the collapse in 2010. And so we self-initiated a citywide assessment, brought in a large consultant, and our teams TV'd a lot of our large collection mains and then identified here's the top tier projects. They were called Tier 1 that needed to be done immediately. And then there was a Tier 2 and a Tier 3. All the Tier 1 projects were done by the mandate time of July 1, 2012. And then the Tier 2 projects, we've completed a number of them, but we've also have still a number of them in the CIP yet to do. So really on the look forward, this utility, we're going to spend at least another $45 million on upgrading those systems in the next 5 years. Next slide. This gives you a picture of some of the Tier 1 projects. That large red line that follows the Big Sioux River, that was a central main. That was a very complex project that a lot of cooperation amongst this community to get that done. And then ultimately, next slide, there's been a lot more work done, and Tier 2, many of those projects on that sheet are done. One of the large ones that you'll see is more into the upper right is the large outfall sewer and a dual force main to the plant. We'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly. So here's our priority projects that are in front of us. Next year, we'll do nearly a $12 million project. And I probably should clarify this terminology because I know Councilor Staggers may pull this contract later tonight. There's no inference to Brandon. When this pump station was built, I think it was just simply the road to Brandon, and so they called it the Brandon Pump House. That lettering's on the side of that building. We continue to. I would expect we'll rebrand that when we build the new pump station. But we want to make sure right now one of our weakest links that we have is the force main that leaves that pump house and goes all the way to the plant. That conveys about 90% of today's wastewater. Again, we've completed what we consider the Tier 1 projects and many of the Tier 2. This is in our Tier 2 list that we want to make sure that we put in a dual force main on a new alignment to not only have that redundancy, but also have the ability to send more capacity through the new pipe. And so that'll be nearly a $12 million project. That design contract is on the consent agenda tonight. The outfall sewer replacement, that'll go from essentially the spillway, that's today that 66-inch pipe, that will go from that spillway out to this Brandon lift station. This is out by Rice Street and Bonson. And then right now we're planning the replacement of this Brandon pump station in 2019, and we've loaded the design in this 5-year capital program. There's a number of other projects that we'll bring forward, but those are really the ones on the front burner. Okay, so some good news with this utility. Even with the amount of investment that still needs to be made in 2012, our rate model still projected a 7% rate increase in 15 and a 4% in 16. Again, now going through a number of those capital projects, understanding what those expenses are and the debt service, our new rate model is projecting a 6% rate increase in 15 and a 5% rate increase in 16. This is a very heavily regulated utility by state and federal requirements. We want to make sure we're ahead of the game. There's a number of communities like Omaha and Kansas City that are under federal mandates in north of $1 billion to upgrade their systems because they have not been as proactive as you have been on making these changes. Next slide. All right, this is the last graph that you'll see like this, and there's less reserve buckets for us to really review and maintain. Again, the green here and this black target line that's our operational reserve that we always want to have on hand. This was critical in 2010 when we had the collapse. We didn't need to come to the council for additional funding immediately because there was cash in the bank, and that's so important to responsibly run a utility. This next target line is what we like to have is about 15% of our capital plan in the bank. In recent years, that cash has built up, and we've just come off 2 years of 8% rate increases. We're going to utilize the state revolving loans substantially to fund these large projects to smooth out those costs over our customers over a long period of time. But you can see that as these red bars go down, we are starting to utilize that cash and kind of come in for a smooth landing. And so these are the two rate increases, the 6% and the 5%, that we are recommending that we take to make sure that this utility can aggressively address its needs. Okay. I'll only take you through the top line, but this and all this information is in your booklets under the revised rate schedules for all the various customers. Today, as you get your sewer rates, you really have two charges. You have a basic charge, and then you have a flow charge. One of the things I think Sioux Falls has always sort of led the charge on is that we've always kept our basic charge very low, and you pay on what you use. And so your current basic charge in 2014 on a monthly basis for residential customer is $3.56. that would go up about 21 cents in 2015 with this rate increase of 6%. And then flow would go from $3.35 up to $3.55, which is a 20% unit increase. Every unit is about 748 gallons. So now we kind of roll this up to a typical rate. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so for 2015, a typical sewer bill today is $27.35. With the 6% rate increase, that will go up on a monthly basis, $1.63, for a revised estimated cost of $28.98. The change for the 4% rate increase or the 5% rate increase in 2016 would raise the utility bills by an additional $1.46 per month for a new bill in 2016 at $30.44. Next slide. Here's the benchmark slide. Today we're right in the center of this graph, and a lot of cities are included. Again, respecting none of these cities make a rate increase, which is highly unlikely. We would move down the chart a few notches, but still in that very responsible level of where rates ought to be. Okay, and then a last item on a fee. Since 2000, in about the year 2000 or so, we haven't changed this fee. Essentially, this only happens about 10 to 12 times a year. But if you're in a part of town where you need to connect to a clay sewer, that takes very specialized equipment that we've maintained over time, but we have not maintained the appropriate fee to charge. And so the next slide kind of right sizes that, brings it up to 2014 labor rates and material costs, and addresses the increase in labor, fuel, and energy transportation, so that the respective change in unit costs. Next slide. Today that cost is, if you call us to core into a 4-inch clay tile sewer, is $149.75. The revised cost was about $397, so we rounded it up to $400, and then took an inflationary rate up to 2016, and then also did the same with a 6-inch size for 15 and 16. Again, this is very few of these actually occur, but we wanted to make sure we got a chance to right size that fee. And I promise, last slide, there is no change, next slide, to the frontage fee, but it is a resolution that we are required to bring forward every year. This is the fee that you pay if you have a 100-foot wide lot in town, that it pays about a third of the street department's budget, which the street department is generally street maintenance and snow removal, pays about a third of those costs. And with that, we will see you next week on June 10th for the first reading. Second reading is on the 17th, and we'd also bring forward the resolution of front foot assessment. Do you have any questions for us?
Any questions from the council? Councilor Jameson.
Mark, could you just go through that whole presentation one more time?
Yeah, we'd love to.
On the policy issue with the garbage cans, what is it currently? Can somebody help me with the current policy?
Yeah, let's go to your
Page 20.
So if you go to your binders and tab to the tab that says garbage policy, we keep it simple. So
Great.
And so you'll notice when you look at the red line strike over version, very few words are being struck and more words are being added to just clarify this. But if you look at that area where it says, it starts out the sentence, the, and that was the red line, the, that struck over, the garbage and recycling containers shall be kept in an inconspicuous place behind the structure, which is reasonably accessible. We just wanted to take out that inconspicuous piece because we've had customers call you've had customers come here and bring you pictures of a number of these large containers that are sitting in front of homes. In some areas, very high density developments, that they really haven't not accommodated that, or they haven't asked them to put them inside. So we've taken the word inconspicuous out, added the word inside, beside, behind, to just make it clear. So if we get a complaint, we can go right to the ordinance and educate our customers on here's where you can put them and essentially where you can't.
Councilor Offenbach?
Yes?
Is Counselor Jameson done?
Well, if I could, the consideration of some of those townhomes, twin homes, condos, those places with that high density, and you've got all those garbage cans out there. I've seen it, saw it just the other day, and I wondered what a solution would be. What about, is it a problem with designation of some sort that you couldn't have a central garbage area that had all those bigger containers like apartment complexes do? Would that be a problem because they're single-family homes? At least that'd be one way. Have you thought of other ways to eliminate the garbage can issue? Because there's nowhere for some of these places. You couldn't fit them in their garage, and the access to their doors are all right there. So even as you drive by, you still see every one of them. There's no place to hide them. Were there other options considered for those very high-dense condo, twin home situations?
I wasn't a part of those committee discussions, so Dave McElroy, can you add to that discussion?
Dave McElroy, sanitary landfill. That, I think, is more of a planning and zoning type issue. We didn't go to that level or that depth because, yes, you're right, it depends on whether it's considered to be an individual family homeowner or multifamily, and there's apartments. Apartments are required to have like a central location that is screened, and so those townhomes and condos are kind of a troublesome area that we didn't really look at. There's more, like I said, kind of a planning and zoning type of issue. But you are right, there are certainly locations where they just can't make them invisible or inconspicuous.
All right, thanks.
Councilor Offenbach?
My question is for Dave. Talk about, because Mark told us this rewrite came from the Solid Waste Planning Board. Talk about who that group of people is.
Right. The Solid Waste Planning Board is made up of representatives from the 5 different counties that the landfill services. It's made up of individuals from the garbage and recycling industry. I think there's 3 citizen representatives, and there's a couple city staff on there as well, like the environmental manager is on there as well, myself included.
Right, I guess, and that's my point, is that it's quite a broad group of folks that I really appreciate their work. But in the 4 years I've been on this council, I've only ever had a question one time about why we don't, about the garbage can thing. And I just want to remind people, this really is just clarifying that you don't have to haul it to the curb. In Sioux Falls, you can leave it right up by the house. On garbage day, leave it by the house, please.
You're really required to leave it by the house in Sioux Falls. We are unique in Sioux Falls. It's almost like the old milk service, some might say. I've heard it referred to as a backdoor service or a house side service. Most places are actually required to put them out on the street. There's, of course, aesthetic as well as potential litter issues with that. So we are unique here in Sioux Falls in that regard.
Well, I just appreciate the rewrite. Thank you.
Councilor Rolfing?
Yes. Mark, I guess Mark would be the one here. Let's start with, I have about 3 of them if I could indulge you that much. That one was answered. The one that I wanted, you said there were 3 tiers on these projects for sanitary sewer collection.
Yes.
I don't remember, maybe I was out, but the third tier, what are some of those projects?
I'll probably bring Mark Perry up because we'll have some of those additional slides for you if you want that detail. And just in the interest of time, we've taken some of that out. So Mark Perry, you want to come on up and just share what some of those Tier 3 projects are?
Just briefly, too. It doesn't.
Mark Perry, Water Reclamation. Most of those Tier 3 projects are projects that are further out into our CIP process in the 2020 to 2030 range. They're not as high-risk projects.
Okay.
And so, and they're also a continuation of some of our annual projects that we do with manhole rehabilitation, pipelining projects, things like that, that we do on an annual basis. So they're just a continuation.
Continuation of, okay, good. The water reclamation, Mark, the problem, not problem, I have heard some things happening in Brandon, Harrisburg, those kind of things where they may feel that they want to drift off on their own. I notice here we've got a Brandon pump station for 15 and Brandon pump station replacement 19, road pump station and things like that. Are we in negotiations with them on as to how long they've got and if we're going to make significant, investments into those products, we want to make sure that those projects, we want to make sure that they're going to be around, correct?
Yeah, that's a good point. Again, that station is just named the Brandon Pump Station. It actually doesn't pump any of Brandon's waste. And so I think we need to rebrand it so we can clarify it. I asked the other day how that came about, and it's essentially been like that for, it'll be there like that for nearly 30 years. To speak to Brandon and Harrisburg, they in probably their best interests are reevaluating their options. And so, but we have also reached out. We've read some of their studies. I will tell you that we have concerns with some of the recommendations that Brandon is considering, just from a standpoint of location to Sioux Falls and what have you. But it's truly their choice. But we've just recently met with them, and we're going to meet with them again. But both of Harrisburg and Brandon's contracts do expire this year. And so they have to make a choice very soon on what they're going to do long-term with their wastewater. It's more of probably to us an environmental issue short-term. If you equate both of those customers today, they're only about 4% of our flow and about 4% of our revenue. So if we lose them as a customer, it's not going to be significant from a revenue standpoint. We more look to what's Sioux Falls going to look like in 35 years? What is Brandon going to look like? What is Harrisburg? But probably also more complex is the EPA's discharge standards to rivers and streams is not going to go down. It's only going to go up. And so similar to what's happened up around Minneapolis, Met Council, where 102 cities flow into one system. So when there's a new EPA regulation that comes out, we're anticipating 2 new ones coming out in about the next 10 years. That'll be fairly significant in cost. Then you only have to upgrade 1 facility in our case as opposed to then 3. Harrisburg's been very open, and so has Brandon. They're just really doing their own due diligence, looking at their options. And so I would expect within probably 2 months for us to really come back to you and say, this is what we've heard, their direction. It is completely a voluntary system to come into the city of Sioux Falls. Brandon's been a customer of 20 years. And so we've got a very good working relationship. When something bad happens in Brandon, they call Mark and his team, and they mobilize many cases to help them restore service. Harrisburg, they secured a large grant and then set a pipeline to Sioux Falls, so they've been pumping to Sioux Falls. And so we're going to work with them, but I can't tell you today the direction that they've chose.
One last one. On pages 51 and I believe it's 59 and a couple, 58 and a couple other ones, they're really good examples of being cauterized. And by that I mean some really good charts, graphs, combination of both, and really a nice job.
Oh, thank you very much. We always look forward to bringing those to you.
You bet.
Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, Mark, can you just clarify on the charts up there when it comes to balances, like 2014? Do we have a total of $18 million, or should we add the red, blue, and green together to come up with above $18 million? Or Can you clarify how that?
No, that would be what we project to end the year with in 14, is cash on hand would be 18 million.
Okay, so when it comes to the operating reserves, then we have 4 million. Then when it comes to the rate stabilization fund, we have about what, $1 million or so? Am I interpreting that right?
That's right.
Oh, okay, thank you. And one other question I have too, and that is on the proposed sanitary landfill. We have an increase of $1 per ton on MSW, bringing it up to $36 per ton. And then C and D, we have $1 a ton increase, bringing it up to 34. I guess I was wondering, why is it more for MSW than it is for C and D? Because with MSW, we're making that money off the methane.
Well, a number of years ago, we went through a calculation on the amount of equipment and resources it takes to actually manage the MSW, and that's 70%. That's about 80% of the waste that comes into the landfill. So it takes 2 large compactors. It just takes a larger effort than the C&D does. And so when we started to look at what those differences should be, that's what they came to, and we've drove those same percentages to date. So it costs us a little less to bury C&D, and that's why the tipping fee is reflective of that.
But once again, we're making lots of money off of the methane that the MSW produces. So maybe we should have an adjustment, or?
We wouldn't recommend that. This is, that's been a great byproduct of the landfill. It's certainly supported to keep our rates where they're at, but this is where we feel the rates need to be.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Erickson.
Just a quick question on the storm drainage, the channel rehabilitation. There's several drainage, it's number 31. There's several drainage areas that go behind houses that I don't know if this fits in the same category or not. Is there some sort of a schedule that those will be dredged out if they're not all made pretty with the rock and whatever, to ensure that that's not going to flood up towards those houses when we get heavy rains? I've received a couple calls with concerns that it's kind of riveting, there's kind of some ruts, and it's not flowing as quickly as it could in certain areas. So I didn't know if there was a schedule for dredging that out, or, and if I could see that, or if what that is.
There is. It's a very vast connected system of the city. I'll probably bring Andy Berg up, because Andy manages our drainage channels and ponds, and then works directly with the city, the street division, to identify when and where those ponds get dredged. So outside of projects like this, because these are complete reconstructions, we've got the next one on is probably Otonka Trail, things of that nature. But there's some good annual ones that, and Andy can even tell you a couple that we just did this spring. Andy.
Andy Berg, City Engineering. Yeah, we basically get out to these properties. Whenever we get calls, obviously we go out and look at them, but we also have personnel with our street department and our water reclamation department that do the evaluations on the storm drainage systems. They're out checking the culverts, checking these channels, and basically we take and rank those as severity. You know, how close are they? A lot of them, the picture in here, for instance, the erosion has gone off the city property or the city easement and into the private property, and is starting to threaten property, that type of thing. So we rank it based on that, along with water quality, and also in an instance like this picture here, there was sanitary sewer flowing underneath there, and the pipe was exposed. So as those things are brought to our attention, we find them in the field, that affects our priority each year. So in certain years, something may get bumped if it is just an erosion issue versus flooding of a home or exposed sanitary sewer. But every year we do go in and just clean out more of the flatter channels that start to accumulate sediment and debris, and clean those out so that they're able to flow at full capacity. We've done a channel over by 32nd and Grinnell last year, and every winter we go in and do those channel cleanings to get that capacity up to par. And then the larger projects like these are the ones that were programmed into the capital improvements program.
And this would be a smaller project, obviously, behind the houses there, so similar to the 32nd and Grinnell. So maybe I'll just get with you in the next week or two and see where this one's at.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Urfenbach?
Thank you. Mark, can I just ask one more question? I think I may be misinterpreting what Councilor Staggers was asking about the methane gas. Does not the fees that we collect for the methane gas, that we sell it to the plant,
Yep.
that money, does it not go back into the landfill budget? So it's actually keeping our rates down? If we did not sell that
100%.
gas, would not our rates be even higher than they are now?
Much higher, yes, because today we sell about $2 million worth of gas a year.
Okay.
And so it's critical.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Jameson?
Mark, you have a summary page of all the changes for residential homes that are being proposed as a recommend. Are they in the binder somewhere, a summary total?
They're not. We can certainly produce that. We've done that in the past. And so one of the things we wanted to do is get to you today, get some feedback from you on what our recommendations are. By the end of the week, we'd like to get this on the city's website. And then we'll also create that kind of a one-page summary on the effects to residential customers. So we'll get that to you.
Well, in that tone, if you could, the feedback from us, I can tell you I've gotten an earful in the past whenever we've raised rates in any fashion, if for any reason. Your explanation about water is pretty clear. Most people get that. But like the storm drainage and the, people may not get that one. Sewer, okay, we can understand that. I think a lot of people, but somehow or another we catch a lot of heat for increasing these rates, and you know that. You get it too. Somehow or another, it's really beneficial if we can demonstrate it in the same fashion you did with the water and use illustrations. I think there's something there. I'm trying to put it together myself on how to present this in a way that is palatable to the public, because I mean, I'm not alone, right? I mean, we catch a lot of heat for raising the rates, and if it's not crystal clear on why we're doing it, it seems a little bit like we're just getting rich over there at Public Works and not, you know. If you could somehow help illustrate it in a fashion that is crystal clear, that'll help us when we defend it and talk about it to the public.
We'll do.
And that summary page, I think, is important for us.
We'll get that done.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? Mark, I have a couple for you.
Yes.
With Lewis and Clark, are there any other South Dakota or our area customers that aren't getting water yet?
The only South Dakota customer that's not connected is Madison, and so you know they're a part of the group that's working to get connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then with the landfill, what's the largest expense that the landfill has now? You know, we have the methane program and some of the other programs that you have out there to save money and save our customers money. But what is our main expense out there?
I would expect it's equipment, but I'll bring Dave up.
Yeah, Dave McElroy again, landfill. Mark's right, it's basically equipment. Equipment, capital expenses. If you want to, some analogy that I've used in the past is basically, you know, we're a growing family, so to speak, at the landfill, so we have to continue to add on to our house, and we want to, again, try to get debt-free. I believe within the next 3 years we will achieve that, and we'll no longer have any debt whatsoever for the landfill. But as Sioux Falls and the region continues to grow, we have to have places to put our waste, and so we have to continue to expand and build those cells. And so it's our capital expenses and our equipment are our largest costs.
Okay.
I think just kind of kudos to Dave and his team. You know, they've got about probably 9 years ago, we were using one 80,000-pound compactor. As trucks would come up, they'd level it off and push on it. And then we started to really see that we're not getting much waste in a cube, if you will, or a cubic yard. And so at that point in time, we upgraded to two 120,000-pound compactors that work now in tandem. And now we've taken the next step to, there's new GPS technology that you can get real-time density of how much waste you're collecting or actually compacting. And so the operators will have a screen. They're all tied into a GPS system, so they know exactly where they're at elevation-wise, filling a cell. But they also can get, it'll be just red on the screen until they hit an area enough until it turns green, and then we can actually be up somewhere around 16 to 1,800 pounds per cubic yard. Well, absent this, you would never know until you actually did either a survey at the end of the year and subtracted it from the previous year. There's just a lot of technology, just the amount of cost. You don't dig a very small cell when you dig a new cell, which is essentially a big hole to deposit the waste. The last one we just got done doing was 20 acres in size, 80 feet deep. So if you can imagine taking 20 acres, digging out the earth 80 feet deep, and then lining it to get ready to responsibly bury trash. It's a very high expense business. This team does it second to none. The city of Lincoln was just up here to find out what the Sioux Falls team is doing, what are some of those strategies they can take back.
One last question. One of the increases in charges at the landfill that I noticed was for trailer houses. It was a $2 increase. Are we seeing a bigger increase of that type of product coming through the gates?
I'll bring Dave up.
Dave McElroy, landfill again. Yeah, I would say within the last year we have, because I think there's really been an increased effort to kind of clean up some of those trailer parks, and so we have. It does kind of fluctuate. We are not the only option for destruction of a trailer house. Basically, that charge is based on an assumption that we can compact the trailer house to 3 foot high by however wide it was and however long it was when it came in. And so, as Mark kind of alluded to, each cubic yard of our permitted airspace has a value to it. And so then we calculate, and that's where we made the determination that we're currently charging $7 and we should be charging $9 per cubic yard. One of the other options for trailer parks to remove those trailers who are no longer habitable, shall we say, would be to actually deconstruct that on the site, bring it in, well, commercial roll off, and then pay a per ton fee as well. And so that's something that a mobile home park owner or a trailer home owner should consider and look at, is which is the option, is to pay people to come in and deconstruct it on site or to haul it to the landfill. And it fluctuates from year to year. So when it makes more sense to bring to the landfill and dispose, they'll do that. When it makes more sense to deconstruct on site, they will do that. So,
if I may, Council, I'd just like to continue the question then. If somebody brings in a full, complete trailer, do we just try to strip off the top and then at least scrap that metal frame?
Yeah. Basically, the top is useless. We do try to scrap the metal, but again, it's not always easily done.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions from the council? I'd just leave that. Okay. Is there any other items that any of the councilors would like to bring up at this time? Do I have a motion? No motion? Okay. I will. This meeting of the informational meeting is now adjourned.